guys, welcome or welcome back. Today's video is going to be about having a conversation when you're anxious. So let's just get on into it. One of the most common questions that I see around or hear is, how can I have a good conversation when I'm feeling really anxious? How do I talk to people when I have really bad social anxiety? How do I communicate clearly and properly and just make friends? Well, there are multiple ways, but it all really comes down to managing your anxiety and shifting your perspective so that you're able to not view the situation as threatening. Because ultimately, when you're anxious, you can't have a clear conversation. You can try, but you're in fight or flight mode. So what you say might not make sense, you might not say what you mean, you might forget what half the conversation's been about. So really, it is about managing the anxiety. Tip number one, if you can, be outside. There are so many distractions around. I always find that trying to have a one-to-one conversation when it's quiet, I find the silence distracting, and that is a big trigger for me. So if you're able to be outside, and walking around especially is ideal, that can be a perfect place to have a more relaxed conversation, because you can take your mind to somewhere else if you need to, focus on the sounds going around, and just be part of the busyness. Distractions are great when it comes to anxiety because you stop your brain focusing on whatever it is a threat, right? So if you are just trapped in a room and you feel trapped, that is all you'll be able to focus on. Whereas if you're outside or in a cafe, there'll be sounds of the coffee machine, sounds of people chattering, different things going on, different sights, smells, sounds. That is perfect for managing anxiety because basically you implement mindfulness. Mindfulness is often used when managing anxiety because, again, you're emptying your mind of any worrisome thoughts and you are just focusing on one thing. Again, it's not ideal because you're trying to converse with somebody. However, you can try and focus more on what they're saying. Tip number two, try to avoid any kind of stressful topics, right? Don't have like a real heavy, deep conversation if you're feeling anxious, because those kinds of topics are likely to trigger anxiety. So for example, if you start talking about arguments or about a really scary movie that you watched, that can then cause your brain to relive that moment or imagine that moment, and that can then trigger your anxiety because often your brain can't differentiate between an imagined situation and a real situation, and then you'll become anxious and have more problems just talking to somebody. Tip number three, breathe. Remember to keep your breathing in check because that does help with managing anxiety. That doesn't get rid of anxiety, it's not like a miraculous cure, and I know that I mention it a lot and it's something that used to bother me when people mention it a lot, but it does help because if you start holding your breath, your heart rate just goes a bit funny, you feel worse, it rises your anxiety, and then you just end up in a worse situation than if you just continually keep your breathing in check. If you notice that you're holding your breath or speeding up your breathing, try out a breathing technique. It can be subtle, you can just allow the other person to talk about whatever they want to talk about, and you just focus on saying, hang on a second, I'm going to calm myself down. The next tip, which is basically addressing the elephant in the room. For a long time, whenever I was speaking to somebody, especially on like a one-to-one basis, you try and hide the fact that you're feeling anxious, and that in turn makes you more anxious because you feel like you can't be honest about it, and you're like, are they going to think I'm weird? Am I acting weird? Am I talking weird? So it becomes a bigger burden than it needs to be. If you are chatting to somebody and you're feeling anxious, just tell them you're not feeling great. If there's something you can do, i.e. walk and talk, let them know, but just address it, because when you address it, it becomes less of a burden, and actually you might find that you are feeling less anxious because of that. It's really daunting. It's something that I hate doing personally because you go, feeling anxious. And then people go, okay, why? And obviously that doesn't necessarily help. However, if you're stuck in a situation and you're trying to talk to somebody, just let them know how you're feeling and perhaps even talk about it a bit. Counseling helps. Talking therapies help for a reason. So if you're in a situation, just talk about it, get it off your chest, and then actually you can just move on and chat about something else. Talking itself is a great distraction from anxiety. So if you just let go of those fears of being judged because of being anxious, you might find that actually you can hold a conversation a lot easier. My final tip of managing anxiety and having a conversation is have something to fidget with, because having that just gives you that outlet of that energy. So you can channel that anxious energy into something else and people won't necessarily notice, whether it's a water bottle, a fidget cube with little switches, or a fidget spinner. Whatever it might be, just find something that you can fidget with so that you can focus as much as you can on the conversation, but you also have an outlet for that anxious energy that then won't just build up inside until it manifests into a full-blown anxiety attack. That's basically it for this video. Let me know in the comments any other tips that you may have for holding a conversation when feeling anxious, or how to start a conversation when feeling anxious. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.